She walked into the most expensive toy store in the city, barefoot, freezing, and holding a single crumpled $10 bill. She didn't ask for a doll or a game. She looked the owner straight in the eye and said, "I want to buy a dad." What happened next will leave you speechless. Change one man's life forever, and prove that some hearts are bought not with money, but with courage. If you're new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and tell us where you are watching from. Now let's jump into the story. Snow had begun to fall softly over the city, covering sidewalks like powdered sugar on fresh pastries. Shimmer Street glowed with its golden lights and holiday banners. Shoppers bustled with shiny bags and excited chatter. The air smelled of roasted almonds and cinnamon. But one pair of feet moved differently through the crowd. They were small feet. Bare and red from the cold, Lila walked with quiet steps, unnoticed among the polished boots and designer coats. Her coat was too big for her, and patched with plastic from a grocery bag. She kept one hand tightly in her pocket and the other curled in a fist by her side. She passed the polished windows of Shimmer Street Toys, the grandest toy store in the city, and stepped inside without hesitation. Warmth inside hit her like a soft wave. Chandeliers sparkled above her. Aisles glittered with stuffed animals that blinked and gadgets that buzzed. Children ran past her laughing, holding the hands of mothers and fathers. No one noticed her standing there. Not yet. At the heart of the store stood Callum Frost, tall and silent behind the marble counter. His silver tie was perfectly knotted, his suit sharp and tailored. He wasn't just the owner of Shimmer Street Toys. He was the architect of its perfection. Every shelf, every scent, every song playing from the ceiling speakers had passed through his approval. He did not like surprises, and he certainly didn't like interruption. Lila reached the counter. She stopped and waited. She looked up at Callum Frost with clear brown eyes, and for a moment he assumed she must be lost. Perhaps a nanny had taken a wrong turn, or a parent had stepped away to answer a phone. But no one followed her. No one called her Nama. Callum prepared to press the button beneath the counter, one that summoned a friendly associate to help with wandering children. But before he could move, Lila pulled something from her pocket. It was a $10 bill, crumpled and soft like it had been carried through storms. She placed it gently on the counter and said, "I want to buy a dad." Callum blinked once, then twice, unsure if he had heard her correctly. He glanced around, expecting a camera crew, a prank, a social experiment maybe, but there was nothing. Just the girl and her earnest face. "I'm sorry," he said slowly, careful to keep his voice polite. "What did you say?" "I want to buy a dad," she repeated, her voice calm and steady. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't pretending. She was making an effort. Callum stared at her, unsure of the next move. He had handled customers from all over the world. He had once diffused a shouting match between two billionaires over a limited edition bear. But he had never had a barefoot child asked to purchase a father. "This is a toy store," he said, gentle but firm. "We sell toys, not ... "I know," Lila said with a small nod. "But every time I see kids leave here happy, they have a dad with them. I thought this is where you get one." Callum opened his mouth, then closed it again. Her logic, in its innocence, made his chest tighten. He thought of the polished families who walked out daily, smiling with arms full of toys and children giggling under fur-lined hoods. Always a parent beside them, always a dad or a mom or both. "Where's your family?" he asked, lowering his voice. "Your mom, Don't have one," she said plainly. "Not anymore." She wasn't asking for pity. Her voice had no sadness in it, just facts, like someone listing items on a grocery receipt. Callum felt something stir inside him, something he hadn't allowed for years. Something warm and uncomfortable held up the $10 bill again. "This is real money," she added. "I've been saving it." Her hands trembled, not with fear, but from the cold. Her lips were slightly blue, her cheeks red like she stood in the wind too long, yet she stood proud, not begging, not pleading, but offering everything she had in exchange for something she believed she could find. Harry Callum glanced behind him. Monitors blinked with security footage. Sales trackers scrolled across another screen, but he saw none of it. All he could see was Lila, small and still in the middle of his empire of toys, standing like a question he didn't know how to answer. "What's your name?" He asked. "Lila," she replied, her voice softer now, her fingers curling tighter around the bill. "And I can pay." Callum couldn't speak. The air felt too thick. The lights too bright. He had built Shimmer Street Toys to be a dreamland. But he had never considered dreams like Herson for the first time in years. Callum Frost didn't feel in control, felt human and utterly unsure of what to do next. The store had closed for the evening, the lights were dimmed, and the music had faded into silence. Outside, the snow fell in thick sheets, coating the city in white. But inside Shimmer Street Toys, one light remained on. Callum Frost sat alone behind the counter, staring at the crumpled $10 bill that still lay where Lila had placed it. She was curled up on the small sofa in the break room. Wrapped in an old wool blanket Shelley had found in storage. Jekyll had told himself it was just for the night. One evening to make sure she was warm and safe. One act of kindness before calling the proper authorities in the morning, yet every time he thought about picking up the phone, he saw her eyes, clear and certain, asking for something he wasn't used to giving in the kitchen at the back of the store. Callum opened the fridge. It wasn't well stocked. Just a loaf of bread, a block of cheese, and a few apples from a catering order earlier that week. He hadn't cooked in a long time. Most of his meals were ordered in or eaten at high-end restaurants. But tonight he made something simple: grilled cheese on the stove. The bread sizzled as the butter browned. The smell filled the small room like a memory from another life. He brought the plate to the break room. Layla looked up, blinking sleepily, then sat up with quiet surprise. "Is that for me?" she asked, her voice soft and unsure. Callum nodded. "Yes," he said, placing the plate in front of her. "It's not much, but it's warm." She took a bite slowly, her hands still shaking a little from the cold. She chewed like someone who hadn't had a real meal in days, savoring every bit. Halfway through, she paused and looked at him. "This is really good," she said, "like magic food." He let out a short breath, something between a laugh and a sigh. He didn't know what to say, didn't know how to act around a child who needed more than a meal. After she finished, Layla spotted a box of crayons on the shelf, dusty and half-used, a leftover from the store's art corner. She picked it up and carried it carefully to the coffee table, then pulled over a stack of receipt paper and began to draw. She didn't ask if she could. She just started sketching with quiet focus. Callum watched her from the doorway, unsure if he should speak or let her be. She was drawing a sun, big and bright, with people holding hands underneath it. Stick figures with smiling faces. One had curly hair like hers, the other wore a tie. "Who are they?" he asked gently. She looked up, then down at her drawing. "Just people," she said. "A girl and her dad." He didn't answer, he just nodded. Her world was made of crayons and dreams, and yet it felt more honest than anything he had seen in boardrooms or meetings. Later that night, as the snow piled high against the store windows, Callum brought out a pillow and extra blanket. He set them on the sofa where she now lay curled up. Already dozing again, he moved quietly, unsure why his chest felt heavy before he turned to leave. She spoke, barely above a whisper. "It's warm in here," she said. "It never is where I sleep." Callum froze in place, his hand resting on the edge of the door. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. He turned off the light and stood there for a long moment, watching her breathing slow. Wrapped in the borrowed blanket. Next morning, the store opened as usual, but Callum was different. He hadn't slept much, and the coffee tasted weaker than it used to. Yet he felt strangely alert. He found Lila sitting on the floor near the doll section, not playing, just watching, as if the toys might start moving if she stared long enough. And he walked over. She pointed to one of the dolls in a glass case. It wore a silk dress and had painted blue eyes. "Does this one have a name?" she asked. Callum checked the tag, then shook his head. "No, it's part of a collector's series. They usually don't come with names, Lila nodded. Then looked around. She found a gold marker on a nearby gift-wrapping station and gently opened the case. She lifted the doll carefully, as if it were made of feathers. Then she wrote on the back of the tag in clear, slow letters. Mirage placed the doll back in its spot, stepped back and said, "Now she belongs to someone." Callum didn't speak. Something inside him shifted, not loudly, not like thunder, but like the slow melt of ice. She hadn't asked for the doll, hadn't tried to take it. She had just wanted to give it meaning, a name, a place, something she herself seemed to long for. Later that afternoon, Shelley pulled Callum aside, her voice low. "Who is she?" she asked. "Her name is Leela," he replied. "And she came in yesterday, alone. Are you going to call someone?" she asked gently. "I don't know yet," he said. And that was the truth. Leela was still sitting near the doll case, drawing another picture, this one of a home with big windows and warm yellow light. Outside, the city buzzed on, unaware that in a toy store filled with glitter and glass, something real had quietly begun. 3 mornings had passed since Lila first walked into Shimmer Street Toys. Each day began the same way, with her sitting quietly by the counter when Callum arrived. She never asked for toys, never wandered far. She just watched, sometimes sketching with crayons, sometimes organizing plush bears by size or color. She said little, but her presence filled the store like sunlight through a dusty window. Callum had told himself he was giving her time. Time to adjust, time to feel safe, time to decide what she needed. He had not called anyone yet, not social services, not the police, not even a friend to ask what he should do. Deep down he knew why. He didn't want her to leave in the 4th morning. Shelley brought her a pair of warm socks, thick and fuzzy with tiny yellow stars. Lila's face lit up when she put them on. She thanked her in a whisper and hugged her knees to her chest like she didn't want to lose the warmth. But not everyone was as gentle as Shelley. That afternoon, Danielle Rivers walked through the doors of the store. She worked in public relations for the Frost brand, and she was sharp in every way. Sharp heels, sharp clothes, sharp voice. She had always seen Shimmer Street Toys as a jewel in the Frost empire, polished and perfect. When she spotted Lila crouched beside the art station with her crayons, her mouth twisted in confusion. "Who is that?" she asked Callum without lowering her voice. Callum didn't answer right away. He watched Leela drawing a picture of a tree with pink leaves, then turned to Danielle and said quietly, "She's staying here for a little while. She's barefoot." Danielle whispered harshly, "And she looks like she hasn't bathed in days." "Callum, this is 5th Avenue, not a daycare. What if a client walks in?" Callum didn't flinch. He crossed his arms and replied, "She's not hurting anyone." Danielle looked at him like he had lost his mind. "Have you called anyone? Is she even safe here?" Before he could respond, a soft voice came from behind the shelves. "I can hear you, you know." Layla stepped out, her drawing in one hand, her other hand clenched into a small fist. She wasn't crying, but her eyes had changed. They were darker now. Callum crouched down to meet her gaze. "It's okay," he said gently. "No one's mad at you." She looked at Danielle, then back at him. "Do I have to leave?" Callum shook his head. "No, not unless you want to." Lila didn't answer. She just sat down on the floor and started a new drawing. The crayons moved slower this time. Next day, it happened that it was just after lunch. Callum was reviewing vendor orders when his assistant, Peter, came into his office with a tight expression. "There are 2 people from Family Services here," he said softly. "They're asking for you." Callum stood up fast, his heart pounding. He walked to the front of the store and saw them, 2 professionals in dark jackets, calm but firm. One held a folder, the other spoke. "Mr. Frost, we received a call about a child staying here unofficially. We need to speak to her." He tried to explain that she had walked in on her own, that she was alone, that he had only meant to help, but they listened with faces that gave nothing away. "We understand," the woman said, "but she can't stay here, not without proper custody. We'll need to take her into temporary care while we investigate." Callum's throat tightened. He had nothing prepared, no legal papers, no emergency contact. Just her drawings and a memory of her asking to buy a dad when they found Lila in the break room. She was coloring again, humming to herself. But the moment she saw the two strangers behind Callum, she stopped. Her hand froze on the page. "Are they here for me?" she asked. Callum nodded slowly. "They just want to talk to you." She looked at the agents, then back at him. Her voice cracked when she whispered, "You said I could stay." He crouched beside her, taking her hand. "I know, and I meant it. I'm going to fix this, I promise. But for now, just go with them." Just for a little while. She didn't cry, she didn't argue, she only looked down and nodded. Like she had done this before. Like this was just another stop on a journey full of doors that closed too soon as she walked beside the agents. She kept looking back, her small hand brushing against Callum's, until they reached the glass doors. Outside, a car waited with the engine running. She paused, turned around, and pressed her palm against the window. Callum stepped closer and pressed his hand to hers on the other side of the glass. He didn't say anything. He didn't wave. He just stood there as the car pulled away, carrying her into the cold winter. When she was gone, the store felt different. The music played as always. The lights shone the same, but everything felt heavier, hollower that night. Callum walked through the aisles alone, past glittering dolls and stacked puzzles. He reached the art station where her last drawing still sat, unfinished. A son with half a smile picked it up, held it gently in his hands, and whispered her name, hoping somehow she could still hear it. The call came just as the city was waking up. Soft light filtered through the tall windows of Shimmer Street Toys. Callum had been at his desk all night. He hadn't slept. He had barely moved. The store was quiet, but his thoughts were loud. Then the phone rang, and the voice on the other end spoke words that didn't feel real at first. The judge signed the order, said the lawyer. "You've been granted temporary custody. You can bring her home." Callum stood there for a moment, frozen. Then he moved without thinking, grabbing his coat, forgetting his phone, not even stopping to lock the door. He didn't call for a driver. He didn't check the weather. He just got in his car and drove. Every red light felt like a mountain. Every turn felt too slow. The Foster home sat on a quiet street, small and ordinary, with a creaky gate and a porch that held stories of its own. Callum stepped out and looked toward the door. Before he could knock, it opened, and there she was, standing in a borrowed hoodie that hung too low on her arms, her hair tied up with a ribbon that wasn't hers. Her face was cautious, her eyes unsure. For a second, she didn't move. Then her lips parted, and she said a single word that knocked the wind out of him. "Papa." Not Mr., not Sir, not even Callum, just Papa. Full of belief and full of Hapesh ran toward him, faster than her legs should have carried her, and he caught her, lifting her off the ground like she was the only thing that mattered. She wrapped her arms around his neck and held on like she might never let go. "I knew you'd come." She whispered into his collar. Didn't answer. He couldn't. He just held her tighter, as if that alone could promise forever. The social worker came out with a folder, papers clipped inside. She looked surprised, maybe even moved. She handed the papers to Callum. He signed them with Lila still in his arms, the pen shaking slightly in his hand, and just like that, she was his, not just in heart, but now in law. Drive back to the city was quiet. Lila stared out the window, her hand resting gently on his arm. She didn't ask where they were going. She didn't ask what came next. She just trusted that it would be okay. "Can we have grilled cheese again?" she asked after a while. Callum smiled. "I bought 3 kinds of cheese, just in case." Her laughter filled the car like sunlight through a dusty room. When they walked back into the penthouse, something felt different. The space no longer echoed. It didn't feel too big. It felt just right. She dropped her backpack by the door and ran to the kitchen like she already knew where everything was. She climbed onto her usual stool and waited while he cooked. "You still burn the edges," she said, teasingly, as he flipped the sandwich. "Tradition." He replied with a shrug. She took the first bite and smiled with her whole face. "It tastes like home." They didn't talk much that evening. But they didn't need to. She wandered from room to room, touching things gently, leaving fingerprints. Like small signatures, he followed behind her quietly, not to control but to witness. She was rebuilding her world, one corner at a time. That night, she fell asleep in the same bed she had once curled up in during the first storm, only now, the blanket wasn't borrowed, it was hers. Beside her on the pillow was a stuffed bear with a bow she had tied herself. Callum stood in the hallway, watching the rise and fall of her chest. He didn't feel tired, he felt peaceful, like a story that had finally found its last pagements. Past, the adoption was finalized, not with celebration, but with a calm signing in a quiet courtroom. The judge smiled and said, "It's always a good day when a child finds home." Callum didn't speak much on the ride home, but Lila did. She leaned back in her seat and said, "So I'm really yours now?" He nodded and replied softly, "You always were." Back at the store, Shimmer Street Toys changed too, near the back where the expensive puzzles once sat. They placed a soft rug and a little table with crayons and paper. A wooden sign hung above it that read Lila's Corner. It was the only place in the store where nothing had a price. Children came and stayed longer. Some drew, some read, some just sat quietly. Parents noticed how the staff smiled more now, how Callum Frost kneeled to tie shoelaces and bent down to listen to tiny voice. Own evening, after a long day, Lila poked at her pasta with a curious look. "Was I expensive?" she asked. Suddenly Callum paused, set down his fork, and met her gaze. "You cost everything I had," he said, pressing a hand gently over his heart. "And you gave me everything I never knew I needed." She nodded slowly, then went back to eating like that answer had settled something deep inside. As she slept that night, surrounded by books and drawings taped to the wall, Callum stood by her door and whispered a quiet thank you. Not to her, not to anyone in particular, just to the stars that brought her to him. Was no longer just a man who sold toys, was someone who had been chosen to be a little girl with no shoes, a crumpled $10 bill, and a heart big enough to change everything.